Reddit, what's your most embarrassing doctor's office story? I'll start. Mine's not so much embarrassing as it is awesome. I had the mumps during my first year of college, and along with that I got orchitis, swelling of the testicles caused by the mumps, in my left nut, which swelled up to the size of a potato. It was really painful and heavy, so I had to carry it everywhere for a while. So I went to the doctor's. He checked my mumps and then I told him there was another problem. I dropped Tro, lay on the doctor bed thing, and he came over to examine. He laughed when he seen it, cause it was freaking huge, and said what seems to be the problem. Jokingly, it was at that moment that I pointed to my regular size bollock and said this one shrank. Cue 5-minute laughter fit from the doc. I had to go to a specialist urologist due to pain in my ding dong. My wife, who is awesome, accompanied me for support. The doc was at a teaching hospital, so he asked if a couple of med students could observe the exam. I say okay, my dignity was already at a new low anyway, so why not? I drop Tro and the doc starts yanking and pulling on mini-me. He takes some notes and then directs the two med students to cop a feel right where he did. I happen to look over at my wife, who is trying to stifle a smile while watching three dudes essentially whack me off. This actually occurred shortly after I was born, and we refer to it as the green pea incident. My brother, 2 years old, was moving to solid foods, and absolutely loved peas. Mushed, boiled, fried, or in things. He loved them. One day, my mom noticed that my brother wasn't going to the washroom. No big deal, she thought. It's only been a day. 2 days later, nothing's coming out. He kept eating and eating. Like the happy little fat toddler he was, eating all amounts of peas. My parents scheduled a day off work and took him to the doctor together. The doctor, of course, says that he must be constipated. It happens to the best of us. At this point, it's been 4 days since the little crap has taken one. The doctor gives him a large dose of prescription strength X-Lax and suggests that they should probably keep an eye on him for the next while. As he's talking to my parents about what they should do, my brother starts to crap. Bright, neon green crap. He had eaten so many peas that the fiber had actually clogged him up, and now it was returning in force. The semi-liquidated crap started flying out, faster and faster like you see in those comedy movies. Eventually, it settled down to a light stream, but not before his crap mist had covered the entire wall next to the examination table. Neon green crap mist all over the doctor's tools, his blood pressure stuff and his posters. It ruined the cushion on the table and stank to high heck. My parents never went back to that doctor again. I'd think after such a performance you'd be obligated to give that doctor your business for the rest of your life. A friend of mine mistakenly called her gynecologist instead of her dentist to make an appointment, and started the call by admitting she was overdue for a cleaning. When I was brought up from being under anesthesia after getting my wisdom teeth out, and before my transportation back home arrived, I recovered enough to unplug my IV and various sensor doodads and wandered into the waiting area asking for a BJ. The nurse promptly gathered me back into my room, and I recall complaining that someone might have said yes and I deserve the right to know. My dad was getting his prostate checked out by this pretty good looking female urologist. She had to insert a catheter since my dad was having trouble peeing. Anyway, she removes the catheter once they're done and my dad starts peeing all over the doctor's leg. She took it like a champ and told him, if I don't get peed on at least once a day, my husband will suspect I'm ditching work to have an affair. Quickly now, pee on my leg and he won't suspect a thing. When I was newly pregnant with my daughter, I was at my OB's office for a pelvic exam. After I stirrup up, my doc is knuckle deep in my vag and says, "Oh, you'll be fine if you have a big baby. There's plenty of room in here." I'm sure she meant that I have a wide pelvic arch and would have no trouble with delivery. But what I heard was, "Wow, I see dozens of these every day, but you have a huge, gaping hoo-ha." One day I was visiting a new doctor and he asked me to remove my pants. I obliged, knowing that he'd probably check me for a hernia and make sure I didn't have a third ball or something. I had forgotten that the night before I had shaved off exactly 1/2 of my pubic hair. As my brain started to panic and he begins fiddling around, the doctor looks up at me and says, "It's easy to start, but it's hard to finish, isn't it?" While cauterizing the hole during my vasectomy, my skin smoked more than it should have. set off the fire alarm, and I ended up with numerous people of numerous career choices in the room with my exposed nutsack. When my wife was in the final stages of labor, it seemed to be taking forever. I slipped out of the birthing suite to get some fresh air and make a couple of phone calls. They made me turn my cell off inside. A nurse came running out and said to me, "Quick, come back. It's all happening." And they rushed me into a room where I was confronted with a huge hairy bag from which a beautiful bushy, dark-haired Mexican baby literally fired out of the birth canal like a rocket. I am going WTF when the doctor hands me scissors to cut the umbilical cord. Well, that was fun, I thought, as I discreetly slipped out and into the next room, where my wife was still hours away from producing. So I used to always get pilonidal cysts when I was in high school. From between 13 to 18 I had it 5 times, which according to my doctor is a lot. These things used to hurt bad. I'd get them right above my tailbone and it would feel like the tailbone was broken. If I didn't get it dealt with right away, I wouldn't be able to walk from the pain. The last time I ever got one was horrible. It was Halloween and I was at my friend's house when I noticed it starting to hurt. I knew right away what it was. The next morning I had my mom take me to the doctor office, but because it was a Saturday my family doctor's office was closed, so we ended up going to a walk-in clinic. The doctor took a quick look at it, said it wasn't the problem, and set me up for an x-ray. By the time the x-ray was over, it was hurting beyond anything I could imagine. It felt exactly like one of the cysts, but I trusted the doctor's word. Later that evening the pain was so severe I had to go to emergency. At the hospital, the doctor there took another quick look at it and told me it was nothing. He prescribed me some pain medication and sent me on my way. That night was horrible. I was terrified. I thought there was something severely wrong with me. I thought I cracked my tailbone after I fell over a balloon at my friend's house or something. On Monday, after a weekend of intense pain, I could finally go see my family doctor. I remember the waiting room being filled with people. It hurt too much to sit, so I stood in the corner with my back bent weird because it hurt too much to stand straight. All of a sudden, I felt instant relief, followed by a smell that was quite honestly the worst smell I ever smelled in my entire life. Even to this day, it smelled like death. The people around me could smell it too. Everyone started coughing, but trying their best not to offend. I could feel my pants were completely wet with the pus of my cyst. When my name was called I was so embarrassed. Everyone knew the smell was coming from me, and now they could see my drenched clothing. I mean, it was like I had just dipped the top of my pants and the bottom of my shirt in water. That's how wet they were. The faces of the people were that of utter shock. They must have thought I peed myself. Later in the doctor's office, the doctor took one step inside the room and said, another cyst. He knew just from the smell what it was. He took a look and said it was the biggest one he had ever seen. He signed me up for surgery. Before I just gotten little surges just for him to pop for cyst. Now a surgeon was going to remove the skin around the area so it would never return, and I have never had one since. Not me, but when I was in the waiting room of the hospital for a broken toe, I saw a somewhat elderly man, 50s 60s, come up to the nurse's desk and cough quietly. She waved him off as a sign to tell him to wait a minute and he started to pace nervously. He was able to catch a male nurse walking by and tried to discreetly tell him he needed immediate medical attention. I was wondering why the guy was so antsy, and that's when I noticed it. The guy had a mixture of brown and red fluid leak down the back of his thigh from his shorts. The male nurse asked him to speak up, and even though he was quiet, I heard him mutter, "I've got a toy dong so far up my ass that I can't reach it, and I don't want the entire dang hospital to know about it." And that, kids, is why you always use flared bases. I had a pay the bills job as an administrator at a private hospital. We had an urgent referral come in for a testicular ultrasound, and the guy whose testicles needed to be checked was quite a famous actor and was performing in a play in town, so the schedule for booking him in was really tough going. So I was skipping through the next 2-3 days of appointment calendars looking for a free 10-minute slot, or a before lunch slot that was filled but likely to run short so there'd be time to speed him in and out. He was on the phone while I was trying to book him in, and I got so self-conscious at the long silence after explaining the normal waiting times and what I was doing that I said, all cheery like, "Don't worry, we'll squeeze your balls in here somewhere." I made sure not to be near the reception desk when he came in. On New Year's Eve 2001 I woke up with an unbearable pain in my left side of my abdomen. I couldn't move for over an hour. I was at home from my sophomore year of college but none of my family was home. After about 3 hours of crying and doubled over in pain in bed I crawled across the house and called my mom at work. She took me to the ER where they did various pressure tests and listening and decided it wasn't my appendix so they did some x-rays. The only other person in the ER was an old lady that had a cut on her head and she was trying to comfort me while my face was red and I was holding back tears. The doctor came in and looked at the lady and looked at me and whispered, "I don't know how to tell you this, but your colon is full of crap." Actual term. I screamed, "That's it. Get it out of me," and he told me he could give me an enema, a suppository or a salty drink. I took the drink and shat for 8 hours straight. I was good enough to go to a party that night but still had the shoots and didn't get drunk. Felt so much better. After a rough night of praying to the porcelain goddess aka puking my guts out, I discovered that most of the blood vessels in one eye had burst. The end result was red where normally the eye is white, so I looked creepy as heck. Nephew told me I looked like Voldemort. Wife insisted I go to the doctor to get it checked out, so I did. Got a random lady doctor. She took one look at it and asked, "So are you into kinky fricking?" To which I replied no, not really. Her response, "Well, you should be careful with that choking stuff. It can be dangerous." I laughed nervously. The nurse kept staring at the floor, and I proceeded to explain that I had been vomiting all night. Even as I left she said, "Well, just be more careful next time." Oh yeah, best part. This was in Provo, Utah, 99% Mormon and apparently home of kinky strangling fricking. Was getting a physical a few years ago so I could play HS football. Usually the doctor feels around your abdomen and that's that. This time the doctor made me strip and made me cough. I hadn't fapped in a few days so having a stranger's hand on my beans gave me a semi which I tried to cover which led me to accidentally fart on him as I turned around. Doc looked at me and said, "You can play," and left. I recently had a sore throat, and when trying to get a good look at it in the mirror, I noticed these large, pink spots all over the very back of my tongue. I spent a week fretting over it, wondering what they were and why they weren't going away, until my mom got worried enough about them that she went with me to my doctor. Upon examining my throat and tongue, he pronounced that what I was seeing were my taste buds. I have never seen my doctor, who is an incredibly stoic man, smile so wide before. My family is never going to let me live it down. Went to the doctor when I was about 8 months pregnant. At that point in my pregnancy I was very gassy and if I tried to hold it in it would get painful after a while. While I was sitting in the doctor's office I felt like I had to fart. I held it in for a while thinking that if I did fart the doctor would be in at any moment. 15 minutes passed and nothing, so I decided to let it go. The tiniest little fart ever, but it stunk like something crawled up my ass and died. 30 seconds later the doctor walked in and asked me what that smell was. Had nasal polyps removed. When there are a crap ton. After the procedure there are several follow-ups to get minor stragglers but mostly also to remove giant blood clots that have formed. My otolaryngologist is busy digging and scratching and scooping, and some monster freaking aliens are being dragged out. I can see my nostrils expanding like I'm passing a chicken egg-sized baby out of them. Then they shloop shut again. Anyway, he is grinding and yanking at this one and it won't come loose. He rotates it a bit, gently places it in a tray, and says nothing but leaves the room with a half smile. 3 minutes later he comes back and tells us he had a silent freak out and had to wash up because a giant bloody string of snot carried elasticity from the pool and slapped up against the length of his cheek like a cheap 25-cent toy from the bins at the front of a Kmart. Getting my very first pelvic exam. First, the doctor was so nervous, she dropped the first speculum getting it out of the package. Hands shaking and everything. Okay, I'm on the table, speculum inside me, doctor and nurse hanging out around my lady bits. I'm trying to pretend that I'm not here when the doctor goes, "Are you on your period? Number? Why?" Komaru. In her nervousness, she'd been way too rough and made me bleed. Thanks doc. About 10 years ago, I had a very promiscuous friend. He would sleep with anything warm, wet and willing, and half the time didn't use any protection. One day he started having a burning sensation when he peed, more than your average UT. He'd hooked up with a new random a few days ago, so he went to the doctor's office to have some tests run. 2 days later the doc's office calls him and says that he needs to come in immediately. He rushes to the doc's office, gets sent to an exam room, and the doc comes in with a clipboard and a very concerned look on his face. Well, about that burning sensation, my friend is nervous and says, yeah. Doc, you work at a restaurant? Friend, yep. Doc, you drink a lot of soda? Friend, yep. Doc, something citrusy, like Sprite or Sunkist? Friend, yep. Doc, the burning sensation when you pee is excess carbonic acid in your system being eliminated. Cut out the soda and stick to water and you'll be fine in a couple of days. Friend, why do you have to call me down here to tell me that? Doc, so you'd stop doing it without protection. Massive hemorrhoids. Went into the doctor and he had to stuff my anus back into my anus. Had to lay on my side for 3 days. I was having a lump on my balls checked. I described said lump to the doctor and he went about trying to locate it himself. I was lying down at a stage staring at the ceiling. After about a minute of him fumbling he admitted defeat and asked me to find it. So I sat up and started to jumble them around in my hands. I was hunched over and he wasn't more than a foot away staring intently at my balls when suddenly a gust of wind blew the door wide open. Just then a nurse walked past the door. That was awkward eye contact. Oh, and before I let you go, are you sexually active? Number, I thought so. During a genital hernia check when I was 12, I ejaculated on my doctor's shoulder when my junk was being touched. When I was in high school I had to get blood drawn and I do not like needles. I went in, got my blood drawn, paid and started to walk out. I got to my car and realized I didn't have a note to get my absence excused, so I went in and got in line to get one. I was standing in line and started to sweat and get cold and started to get really dizzy. All of a sudden I started to have tunnel vision and stumbled into this lady that must have weighed 350 pounds and was like 5 feet 2. She turned around and looked at me like I was an idiot and then I started to go down fast. I am 6 feet tall and fell over like a tree face first right into this lady's giant boobs, bounced off her and hit my head on the floor. Woke up 2 minutes later in the back of the doctor's office. On the way out I made eye contact with my motorboatee. She was not amused. You've been visited by Professor Papa. You'll ace all your classes this year only if you comment study hard Papa. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check out another video. Or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.